Today is August 22nd, 6:30 p.m. This is the Olentangy Local Schools Board of Education. It's a regular meeting. I can call the meeting to order. Ms. Hatfield, please call the roll.
Mr. Bartz?
Here.
Mrs. Fiesel?
Here.
Mr. King?
Here.
Mrs. Patrick? Here. And Mr. O'Brien?
Here. Please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, I'll now entertain a motion to approve the agenda as written.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion on the agenda? Ms. Hatfield?
I'm sorry, was that Mr. Bartz or Mr. King that seconded?
Mr. King did.
Thank you. Mrs. Fiesel?
Yes.
Mr. King?
Yes.
Mr. Bartz?
Yes.
Mrs. Patrick?
Yes.
And Mr. O'Brien?
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, we now have our only presentation item. It's a staffing update from Mr. Meyer, our Chief Operations Officer.
Good evening. Good evening. It's been a great week. I just want to say that from my perspective, a great week. So Mr. Rafe has us the first 3 days of school break the district in thirds, and we get to travel around the district and go into all the buildings. So I thought, from my perspective, it was extremely smooth opening. One thing that I actually did this year, going into all the buildings, so we visited all the building and transportation, all the different departments, but I tried to personally visit all of our new teachers one of those 3 days, and I got to see most of them. Some of them schedules just didn't match up, but I did get to see most of them, so that was really good. And my third child, and this is a joke because people always ask me, you have a third kid? I do have a third child, Isabella. She's a 9th grader at Liberty, and she's a little anxious going to high school, but great transition at Liberty High School as a 9th grader, so that was real positive. Over the summer, we have mini orientations where we bring all the new teachers in small groups. And last year we changed this because we wanted the groups to be more intimate and small. And it's just another way that we can make big feel small, because we did hire a lot of new teachers again this year. But one thing I told them, they were selected for a reason, and selected to come to Olentangy, and obviously we have a rigorous application and interview process, and a lot of people want to be in Olentangy, so congratulated them for their selection and their new jobs. But I was also then reflecting, when I came into the district in 07, 08, the year prior to opening Orange in 08, we were a little over 13,000 students. We opened the doors with over 22,000 this year, including preschool. So it's unbelievable, just in my time here, the growth that we've had here in Olentangy. But, and I tell people all the time in my circle, when I was a high school principal, we talk to a lot of parents, and people move here, and we say it all the time, because of the school district. I told our new teachers too, it's not by accident that we have grown by that much. And really the common denominator is are the people that we hire in the district. It's just impressive on all of our staff, from bus drivers, the food service, the custodians, obviously the teachers, and how they care for our children in the district. It's unbelievable. So, with that said, we did hire in this hiring season over 200 this year. I start with a staffing timeline. So one thing that I do in our mid-year checks with all the buildings, part of that is a winter staffing meeting. So in December, actually, we go to all of the buildings and we talk about current staffing, and then obviously projected staffing. So resignations, retirements, and projected staffing based on enrollment projection. So we get all of that information gathered in December. And then what we did this year is we posted anticipated openings, and we did it for 2 reasons, because we like to get that process started with our application pool. And I'll mention this here in a minute, but as you know, we always do a certified interview day here in Olentangy, which is very, very well received, and a lot of people want to come. So what we did this year was we posted anticipated openings so we could build that pool of quality candidates that we wanted to bring to Certified Interview Day in March. We always do it right there before spring break. So we did that. So that was new this year. High school and middle school staffing meetings. So we always traditionally hold a high school and middle school staffing meeting, because what happens is course registration drives where we place people and then who we hire if we have to hire, and also allows us then to analyze moving people. Because sometimes and again, because of Berlin added seniors this year, we did move internally transferred teachers before we actually hired externally. So that was good, but one thing that we did new this year was, we used to do that separate, and we still did it separate, high school and middle school staffing meeting, but then we also did a shared meeting. After we had our separate meetings, we came together and did a shared meeting, because what happened in the past is everybody go back and build their master schedules. So the master schedules were built and they were kind of locked in. So if we still needed to share people between high school and middle school, and a lot of times with our world language teachers, we do share between levels in some of our electives. So we made sure that they didn't lock in schedules, and we came back together to really look at how we can absorb and share resource across the secondary division. So that was new this year, and it worked out really, really well. We also, and we did this last year, we have an annual district-wide elementary staff intent form, and this is important for two reasons. Number one, it standardizes the voluntary request across the district in all elementaries in all elementaries the same way. So how teachers report whether they want to move grade level or if they're interested in moving out of the building to another building. And that was important for the redistricting process in the elementary, but it's also going to be important moving forward too, as we look at our capacity issues at the elementary, especially next year. So that's been good, and that's in collaboration with the OTA in our office as far as creating that and sending that out. So then we, after all of those internal things are done, we post externally. And I put April, but some of those external postings happened before that, so it's kind of fluid through late winter and spring. One of the metrics we have in our office is up there, like we look at the percent of positions filled. So by June 1st, July 1st, and August 1st, because in the teaching ranks, you get offered a job, there are a lot of things that you have to go through, so you just don't jump in the classroom the next day. So we really try to get ahead of that as far as onboarding and processing and verifying credentials to make sure that we're ready to go in August. Always our biggest, I think, asset is our reputation. Again, I said it before, people want to be in Olentangy. And again, I attribute that to community support, our board support, administration, and obviously the wonderful people we have in the district. So we continue to have job fairs, so we do it internal and external. We had 8 internal, and 7 of those were classified. Classified is a lot more dynamic as far as resignations, when people retire, why people are resigning, and obviously the need to fill positions. So I want to say almost once a month we have a classified job fair. And then we have our one big certified job fair here in March. And then we ended up attending 27 certified career fairs around the state, or we may have gone down to Kentucky, out of state, and maybe West Virginia at Marshall University last year. So that's good for us because, again, we have a strong brand in Olentangy, so obviously going out and attracting candidates from across Ohio for sure, and contiguous states, that's important for us. We're proud of this next stat. It's hard to get in Olentangy, so we always encourage those who we like in the interview process to apply to be a substitute here, because we have so many opportunities. The district pool sub program that we started a couple years ago has been really, really effective for us. and then also long-term sub-opportunities, so maternity leave, illness, a lot of opportunity. So we ended up hiring again this year, and this is of the 93 hires, 23 were out of our sub pool. And it's an opportunity for somebody to showcase actually what they can do in the classroom, and principals get to observe them really doing the job. So we're proud of that. And then obviously our District Diversity Committee referral program, that's still good for us in recruiting diverse candidates, where we encourage people in the building, people in the community to send us referrals, and we look at those referrals and try to get them in an interview process if we can. Again, just some highlights. I already mentioned the certified interview day. And you remember from last year, what we do is we pull from the career fair certified interview day, we create a candidate list. And we've done a lot to streamline that with the principals, because it's a tool for the principals to use, because when we're going to post a pre-K3 elementary job and 400 and some apply for it, it's hard to go through 400 and some applications. So there are some things that we do internally to help move or push some of those candidates to the top of the list. There's the application, and I talked about this a couple years ago. We reset our application system 2 years ago, so we keep active applications for 18 months only. After 18 months, applicants have to let us know if they want to remain active. But as of this week, 5,672 active certified applications in the system, over 2,300. So we do have a lot of applicants in the systems, and that's really from all of the efforts of things that we do as far as promoting Olentangy. I'll just mention 2 things up there as far as some external job boards. Some of our harder to fill positions, especially in the classified ranks, last year we started advertising on Indeed. That's really helped us to get some applicants in the pool to interview for bus drivers, for custodians. So that's been actually a really good strategy. And then we also started a LinkedIn page out of Human Resources, where we're trying to promote our career fairs and job opportunities that way. So that's helped. And then one other piece, higher enterprise, I'm going to talk about this, our educator professional inventory. So this is new for us. So within the application, they have to fill out the application. When a person applies for a job, then after the application is submitted, they get an assessment. So this is the teacher assessment, educator's professional inventory. And so really what that assessment does is assesses the 3 indicators to the left. We look at qualifications, obviously qualifications through the application, resume, past experience, but we look at those 3 indicators, teaching skills, cognitive ability, and attitudinal factor. And so what happens is that in our system, all of our applicants have a score. And what's good about this is we can sort. So again, if I'm a principal and I have 400 applicants, I can sort by that column. And I can sort by those scores. And again, it's just another piece of data that helps identifying some quality candidates. And 2 things in particular with that score, every principal will receive a personalized interview guide for each applicant. So they can use those. And so what it'll do is generate questions based on strengths and opportunities for improvement. So it always sandwiches. The first question will be a strength question, and then questions in between of growth opportunities, and it'll end with a strength. So that's really good for a principal to use for a screening tool when they want to bring somebody in. And then if we hire somebody, there's a professional development profile. So all of our teachers have to develop every year a professional growth plan. So for new teachers, this professional development profile is a really good resource because it's around just that teaching indicator. So it gives the administrators really good data on creating and collaboratively working with the teacher on areas to work on professionally for that first year. So, that's another good tool for us to use. Onboarding, so again, we changed, I think it's been 2 years, but electronic onboarding. Here's another stat. I looked, when I came to the district, I think we had a little over 1,500 employees. We're now over 2,600. And so we continue to grow. And in my office, we've added 1 support staff. And I don't say that to complain or make excuses, because the team members in my department, they go out of their way. Obviously, we want to provide impeccable customer service and support for the organization. So we continually look at, and I empower people in the department to look at ways we can be more efficient. And we've done a lot. Actually, I think it's over 40 now, either new processes or enhanced processes in our department to streamline and to integrate and become more efficient. But a lot of work, and all of them. They give from the receptionist right down here to the sub desk, classified, certified, really do a good job of caring for our employees. So I'd like to, for sure, kudos to them. They do a really good job. So our another metric we have, once we hire and get the recommendation, we want to start that onboarding process in 10 days. So you can see there's the percentage. So we had 90%, 96% for certified, 99% for classified. So once the person's recommended, we start that right away. Because again, there's a lot of things that have to happen as you're onboarding for different positions. And then we survey based on that experience, because we're starting to do a lot with our employee experience now, from the recruitment to the selection. And then I'm working with, we've had discussions in the curriculum department about the journey through Olentangy to have establish checkpoints to collect information back from our employees. So that's another survey we always do with our onboarding. People love it, very efficient, 95.6%. That's a really good, we're proud of that. And that's really a team effort that goes into that. I talked about this. So last year we had maybe 3, but they were larger groups. So we wanted to break this down again into smaller, more intimate groups to really go over kind of nuts and bolts things. So this is pre-New Teacher Academy. Because when you come into a large school district, it can be intimidating, even if you're coming from another district. But there are a lot of things that we want to go over with our new employees. Technology first, so they always come in for the first 2 hours, they get their laptops and they go through all the technology and set up everything, because that just in itself, getting technology to work, but our technology department, I mean, almost it's flawless this year with all of our groups. So they come in and they get their laptop and they get all their logins and everything going, and then we come in the second half, HR, and we go over board policy, the OTA contract, payroll benefits, because a lot of questions they have about that. Professional code of conduct, that's important in education, and we really talk about the professional code of conduct and the responsibility we have as educators and the role models that we are. And we tell them, in Olentangy, we live in a fishbowl. Everybody's watching us. We go over that. And again, we're trying to be proactive, so in the sense we don't have to be reactive later sometimes with things that come across my desk. Schoology is a great resource for us. So we created that new Schoology course for all of our new hires. So obviously going through the course right there that day, they log right in, they go through the Schoology, but more importantly, it's a resource they can take with them after. It's electronic and they always have it. So they can refer back to, sorry Elaine, they didn't memorize the contract in 2 hours, but I'm sure they'll get back to it. So that was really well received, and obviously then that goes right into the next step of the New Teacher Academy and building orientations. And again, survey was, the survey data was very, very positive from that this year. Okay. New Teacher Academy, again, you guys know what that is, but it's always well received. And again, we try to get the nuts and bolts things out of the way, so then really, why are we here? Our fundamental purpose is learning. I mean, obviously we want students to learn, but we also want adults to learn, because if adults are learning in our organization and continue to learn, our students are going to continue to learn. So that New Teacher Academy is really that focus, what our purpose is. The Olentangy Foundation and really curriculum does an outstanding job of initiating and acclimating our new teachers to Olentangy and the Olentangy way. All right, so there are the numbers. Resignations and retirements, you can see where we were: certified, administrative, classified. Our exit survey, which we started 2 years ago, that's up from like 22% from last year, so that's really good as far as getting information from people who are leaving the district and why they're leaving. So if they're not retiring, for certified staff, top 2 reasons leaving the district: relocation, staying home with kids. So, you know, we do have a lot of young teachers who start families and, you know, choose to stay home. My wife was one of those. She stayed home for 11 years before she went back to work. But, so that happens. New staff members employed. So Roger asked this question at the last meeting. We ended up hiring 93 certified, 48 from the A candidate list, so 52%. Again, that just validates and helps us to validate the resource that we provide for principals of getting all of that information to put candidates, quality candidates, in front of them. And then we're always proud of, and it's not easy, just because you're an Olentangy graduate doesn't guarantee a job here, but obviously we have outstanding students and outstanding people, so we did hire 15 Olentangy district graduates, teachers, and 13 out of our classified. So, we're always proud of that. Again, commitment from the Board of Education, the superintendent, as far as our efforts on minority recruitment. We're pleased. Obviously, we can always do better, but certified 5.6% this year, administrators 33.3%, and then classified 13.3%. The classified administrator percent is up from last year's. I think classified was 11 point something percent, and administrative we were 25. Certified's down this year, but again, we're going to continue to attract top talent and attract diverse candidates into the district. Certified budget. We always want to maximize fiscal responsibility within the 5-year forecast. So I work closely with Emily and really curriculum, all of the departments to establish what's in the forecast based on growth, for the most part, student growth, and then need. We hired 93 new certified teachers. Obviously, we had resignations and retirements. 53 were for growth, but actually we didn't hire all 53. We only ended up hiring 51.67. So we were actually below that growth number. But I don't want to say it's in the bank, because special ed knocks on my door every day. We may have to answer the bell. But we really look at, we put them in the forecast, but obviously we're going to do our due diligence to make sure that we need them and not just fill them just because they're in the forecast. That's a challenge. It's a challenge, and it's going to continue to be a challenge next year as we continue discussions, especially around the elementary and the capacity issue. Our average years of experience for the new teachers hired this year, 4.32. We use that metric. That's what we put in the forecast. We use a master's step 3, 52,825. So the average salary of all our new teachers fell just a little under that, 51,422. So who are we as an organization? There's a certified breakdown. FTE is going to be smaller than total bodies, but you can see from certified to classified administrators. ESC, we do have a lot of, we still hire support services, a lot of personnel through the ESC. And then that's our substitutes right now, and that'll climb. Our certified subs will be, in another month, it'll be over 1,000. The substitute numbers aren't in that total number. So you see the total number, 26, 23, as I mentioned before. And then I broke this down too, because we're going to continue to monitor Where we sit experience-wise. So I broke it down male, female by level, and then obviously that top one, percentage-wise, teachers 1 to 5 years, 6 to 10, 11 to 15, which is the largest group, 16 to 20, 20 to 30, and then 30 plus, the percentage of teachers in those years of experience.
On that 30 plus, do you know what it is numbers wise?
Yes.
I'm just thinking for retirement planning.
It is, hold on.
1% of 1450 would be
20.
two people.
Yeah, I know, that's like, so that doesn't sound like, that doesn't sound right, you know, because we would have more than that, because you want to plan for retirement replacement.
I think you'd probably take the 20 to 30 plus, 30 plus, and plan around there because.
Well,
how
but
many get
now,
30 plus?
what is the retirement, 35 years?
35.
Yeah, so it's 35
35.
years.
Yeah.
To
Well,
get your
it's
full
still
retirement.
phasing in up till 2026. There's a phase in of years of
Okay.
experience and age, and you
So-
have to hit,
So we could have some of,
There's an-
still under the old rules?
there's an or up until
Okay.
2026. After 2026, then it becomes an and. You have to have 35 years and be
Yeah.
60. So,
Right.
you know,
Phased in by age, yeah.
so when it hits that hard stop, and you know, it's gonna be a challenge. And again, if you started teaching when you were 21 or 22, you're looking at 38 years. So you're hitting 60. And, you know, a lot of times, and then I think we're gonna also be faced with, there's gonna be a lot of people faced with out there, the challenge of, like my wife, I like to say, gave up her whole life to raise our
Right.
children for 13 years. She'd have to teach till she was 68 to get full retirement.
Mhm.
Right.
It could happen.
It's gonna happen. It's not gonna happen for her, but it's gonna happen.
You can help her out.
1.4% is 14 people.
Yeah,
So that feels a little better.
yeah.
I won't say what I usually say after that.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
But for our future planning,
Yes.
we need to know those
Mhm.
bands,
Right.
you know.
Well, and I'm
right?
looking at it though, the vans don't look, again, a lot of people, a lot of common perception is our per pupil cost, or per pupil expenditure is very, very low because all we do is hire brand new young teachers. That's a pretty good distribution in that, a van. Obviously, it had a little spike in the 11 to 20 or
Right.
15 to 20, whatever.
But overall, I think it's pretty
I had
balanced.
an attorney when I first started warn me,
Mm-hmm.
you know, saying, you know, in 10 years, Julie, you're really gonna have to watch this because you're gonna be pricing yourself out of the market as the teachers go up. And that really hasn't happened.
No, at least since I've been here. it
Be
hasn't.
interesting to look at it over time. Because if you look at the contract and the steps of the
Right.
contract,
And we,
where
and
we're competitive or we're not competitive.
Right.
it's-
and we, remember, we go 0 to 20 steps, and then we start to stagger 22, 25,
Yeah,
and 29
right.
too. Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay, and then the last, I put this up here because Mark's gonna get more into the enrollment when he gets up here, but, as you know, we try to keep that ratio at or below 22 K2, and then at or below for sure 24. So I think if my math's correct, and this is as of last Friday, enrollment has dropped a little bit. I think it's 113 today.
It's
but-
113,
yeah.
I checked today, yeah.
So this is as of last Friday, but 27 sections in our elementaries over our ratios, what we have. So, you know, one of the concerns or challenges for us moving forward, especially next year, is going to be elementary capacity, because right now I think the net is 5 open classrooms. So that's going to be a challenge for us, as well as, I think we have forecasted the next 2 years at the elementary level. I wrote it down here. Well, 12 K5, but 18 total, including special ed, so, yeah. And then 12, and then 12 K5, and then 17, based on enrollment growth. And that's calculated by dividing that 24 ratio by what our growth number will be. So, you know, that's gonna be a concern, so we're gonna have to continue to look at that again, and just because we have those in the forecast doesn't mean we're gonna fill them, especially next year. We're gonna have to look at the elementary, and class sizes right now. I'm predicting they're gonna go up. Now, obviously, we can't go over the 24
Right.
ratio by contract, by the OTA contract, but we're gonna have to take a look at that. And again, going back to the elementary intent form, if we have to transfer teachers next year because sometimes we just don't know where the kids move
Right.
in. We can do grade advancement, we just don't know sometimes how it's gonna pan out. So we're gonna have to really take a hard look at that this spring to try to balance as best we can with the rooms that we have. So,
I think one other point, while we're 123 over forecast, we're actually 450 over where we ended last year.
last year, right.
So we planned for growth, the growth can be
Right.
even stronger than what we planned. I think that's an
Correct.
important data point to keep
Right.
in mind.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other challenge, obviously, we continue with special ed. We continue to identify, and obviously, the level of service that we provide and the services we provide,
yeah.
quite frankly, that impacts staffing. Our ESL, we increased our ELL population this year, so that continues to rise as well. So those are things we're going to continue to monitor and look at, and I'm going to continue to work with pupil services and Jack's office on identifying some strategies to work through that.
What about, are you seeing an impact of College Credit Plus impacting at the high school level? Because kids are taking their classes, and I will tell you this, I had a mom tell me that her junior son at Orange is taking his English class at a local college, I'm not gonna say which one, because it's easier than taking the AP class at Orange.
So
I've heard
And
that.
he'll still get college
Right.
credit, assuming he passes the class.
So anecdotal, yes, because when we were going through staffing last year, moved to Berlin, they added a senior class. So Liberty really didn't drop enrollment. Well, we reduced, I don't know exactly what department, a couple departments, teachers where we transferred to Berlin out of Liberty, but they didn't have the course registration to drive the need to staff.
Right.
So for sure, that was an impact at Liberty
Yeah,
last
because
year.
they're taking College Credit Plus for free, we're paying for it. And then you might be losing the kids at the AP level. Or, I mean, even in regular English or
Yeah, right.
regular math or whatever. But I think, and that's hard to predict.
Yeah.
Other questions?
Anything else for Mr. Meyer?
I got a question. I'm just curious, obviously a very sophisticated program, and multi-layered. I'm curious to know how much sharing there is with other districts. If other districts call you about how you're doing things and vice versa.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
How much of that happens?
Yeah, just collaborate. We collaborate with colleagues in our like positions across the district. So the ESC holds quarterly meetings, so a lot of times we can get together there and collaborate. Yep. Like the EPI assessment, as long as it's within 18 months, if you filled it in for another district, like Upper Arlington uses it, so if you filled it out for another district, it automatically, when you fill out our application, would populate into our system.
Oh.
Yeah.
So you only have to do it once.
Yeah, for 18 months.
Yeah, right.
Mm-hmm.
What other districts use that program?
They're all over the country, so
Any in Ohio?
in Ohio, in Central Ohio, no, Upper Arlington, we use it.
So have we been using that scoring system long enough that you can go back and back test it, say, okay,
No.
these are the people that made the list,
Nope.
hired them, and
We're,
that
that's,
stand out.
that's next phase, so what we're gonna do is then we're collecting data of everybody we hire through a score, and then obviously we're gonna do analysis, but this is the first year
First year.
that we implemented, yes, so.
It's just more robust than what we were using before.
Gallup.
Yeah.
And Gallup, see what happened or with Gallup, and I'll just talk about it real quick. They'd have a cut score and they'd go highly recommend, recommend, not recommend. Well, somebody could miss it by 1 point and be not recommended. This is just way more information.
Just by
And-
score.
And this is predictive on teacher success, but ultimately, if students are successful, then teachers are successful. So this is correlated right to student achievement. Absolutely, yeah. And that's been derived from research study all across the country. So urban school districts, suburban, rural, over 200,000, and in Canada as well.
Good stuff, Todd.
Yeah. Thank you.
It's been a while.
Yeah.
All right, next is the board president's report. Really what I wanted to do was to try to set some context for the discussion we're about to have, led by Mr. Rafer on the bond levy planning. So two things. One, what's driving us here to have another levy discussion? And it's the same suspects that's driven us to levy discussions for the past 10 years. It's growth and lack of fair funding from the state, right? And so it's a common theme that we're going to continue. We're going to have to make sure it gets out that growth, we added 452 new students from June to August. And we tried but failed to get a more equitable funding formula put in place. And it's put us in this position where now we've got to start talking about a levy. And then second, it has been and continues to be kind of the view of the board that we explore and exhaust all options before we have this discussion, right? And if you think of options, we're continually working with schedule, continuing to look at balancing the population via redistricting, which we know is never fun. We've added incremental space to buy us time, and we're trying to hit every lever we have to hit before we come back to the ballot. I think it's an important context and background to keep in mind as we start to have this discussion, that we don't just jump right to a new levy is the answer, that we try to hit every possible option first. So I want to make sure we keep that context in mind. So with that, I didn't have anything else. Any other board members have anything you want to offer? Okay. With that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Ray for the superintendent's report.
Very good. Did you steal the foot? Did you steal it? I'm always challenge. My greatest challenge is working the PowerPoint. Kevin, Mr. O'Brien, that was a great way to frame our discussion that we'll get to when I'm done with this report, and Emily, Ms. Hatfield's done with her report. But for additional context, 453 additional students at $11,000 per pupil is $4.985 million in expenses that we have to incur to educate those children. And again, we always say, well, I'll debate with anybody whether it's worth 11 million, but Dublin does it for 11,000. Dublin does it for 13, Arlington does it for 15, and Columbus Academy costs 25. So we're continue to do something right in those lines. So thank you. Thanks everybody for being here. It's great to see members of the community out. No offense to our typical attendees, but it's always good to have extra people in the audience. We have a student journalist from Liberty High School. Welcome, welcome. So just as you know, you guys, I think we had a great convocation. It was really well received. The speaker was really well received. The staff feedback was excellent. They appreciated the focus on their well-being to start the year. We did honor the 2 employees of the year from last year. Shane Schoaf is a middle school teacher, social studies teacher at Orange Middle School, and Robert Bell, the late custodian from Liberty High School, was the classified employee of the year. So we were happy to honor them. It's a picture of Robert's daughter, Amber. So that was what we did at convocation. First day of school, as you know, we did what we called a soft opening. And I give Mr. Wright credit for the idea. We spend so much time celebrating the end of the school year, we thought we should really focus on a celebration of the beginning of the school year and really work on developing relationships and team building and establishing the culture of the school and getting to know each other, activities, engaging in a lot of fun. As Todd said, we were out and about all over the place, and it really was great to see our kids and our staffs engaged in such positive activities to start the school year. I did receive a lot of very good feedback from staff and the community on that. So again, Mr. Wright, he really worked with the buildings to let them go and establish the activities they wanted to do, but make them their own. And we did receive very positive media coverage from it, so I was happy for that. Seniors are now in Berlin, so that's Mr. Spinner had, of course, I don't know, probably 12 or 13 pep rallies in the first 2 days. That's really not a joke. That's probably
We
true.
know, we
But-
know.
Another historic year.
Yeah, it's not, no, this year's epic. Epic following, this year's epic, but, you know, it is historic because there is a first senior class now at Berlin, and so, which means for us, we're doing 4 graduations this year, so we're thinking that far out, that'll be a particularly long day, but it's just, you know, again, that excitement is, I am seeing that same excitement and enthusiasm all throughout the district, but congratulations to that first senior class. We had a former student, Amanda Baugh, who graduated from Orange a few years ago, who's now a sophomore at Columbia. Her father is involved with the Wuhan school system in China. There were 6 delegates that came over here, and so we set up a visit with them. We signed a memorandum of cooperation and exchange. Wuhan is a city, the capital city of the Hubei province, which is, you know, a state. The province is a state in China, and it's like, and it's been the sister state for Ohio since 1979. So the gentleman to my left there is the head administrator of the school district, the Wuhan school system, and he is responsible for 1.4 million children. So he did offer to exchange positions. I respectfully declined. Take 22,000. So I want to make you all aware and the community aware. See some stats up there. The CDC is now reporting that 30% of all high schoolers are vaping, or experimenting with vaping, and those statistics are likely underreported. It's probably the #1 issue I hear about from our community as a problem in our high schools particularly. Actually, I'll give credit to Mr. Wright. He was, as we were hearing these complaints coming in and discussing what we could do about it, he was actively researching technology available. We found technology sensors that can be installed in our restrooms, and the sensors, unlike a smoke detector that has to detect smoke, the reason our smoke detectors don't detect the vape is because it's a water-based. So we had a demonstration, and then we decided to pilot it and put them in and see if they actually work. And we found out very quickly they do work very well. Basically what happens is that if the vape sensor goes off, it sends a text to an administrator or the entire administrative team with a timestamp. We can go back and timestamp who entered the restroom at that time, who exited the restroom 2 or 3 minutes after that time. They are now a suspect, which gives us probable or not reasonable suspicion to search them, and if they're in possession, they're guilty.
So it's not an audible alarm,
No.
so they don't know
Mhm.
the alarm has been triggered.
Mhm. And it also, the sensors also will detect a higher level of noise volume. So if there is potentially a fight in a bathroom, because again, that's the most likely place to not have supervision. So because we believe they work and work very well, we are now in the process, you'll have a recommendation in front of you to approve the purchase and the installation of those very shortly, as soon as we get the final pricing ahead, but it's gonna, we believe the estimate is right in the neighborhood of $75,000 total for all the high schools. About, how many bathrooms do we have?
We ended up with the
60.
2 we have installed, we need 66 more.
Yeah, 66 more total. So it is, I mean, it's amazing, because I was with a principal in a meeting at the school they're installed, and he said, oh, just got hit. But, you know, again, I think this is obviously an effort to curtail it. We want to continue to work with our students to educate them about the dangers of vaping and not have it be in our schools, but the most likely place for kids to vape is in the bathrooms. You know, if they're going to continue to be bold enough to do it in classrooms and other places, you know, again, we'll continue to monitor how we enforce that. As you know, we did up the punishment for vaping and made it like So the first offense is a 3-day suspension.
I have a question about that.
I do too. Then go first.
Refresh my memory on the policy covering the cars. If the cars are in the parking lot, can they contain them or not?
No, well, I mean, if we, so again, by law, the school administrator can search a student if they have a reasonable suspicion that the code of conduct's been violated. Now, I would jokingly say as principal, I'm a reasonable person and I'm suspicious of all of them. But, you know, it's not like a police officer that needs probable cause that a crime's committed. So a student comes to us and tells us, Billy has vapes in his car, that's a reasonable suspicion. We can go ask the student to search their car. Now, they can deny, and then you can have debate, discussion on it, but, you know, then...
Today on my way to school, there was a girl in a navy blue car hitting her vape as I look over.
Well, and again, that's, and so, you know, just like, you know, it takes a village.
Yeah.
You know, and again, you know, I have people, like a parent will come up to me at a football game or a sporting event and say, all the kids are drunk.
We're not selling it at the concession stand.
I said, well, what do? You know, who did you tell? Did you tell there's police officers, administrators, or, so again, if, you know, if, like I say, it takes a community, people, you know, we're not, and again, we're not looking to get anybody in trouble. Administrators aren't looking to get people in trouble, but again, I would think this is a wise investment to, just like what we do with our drug testing, we think it acts as a deterrent. Having the sensors in the bathrooms will act as a deterrent. You know, the thing that bothered me the most is when I hear from kids who don't vape, who say, I can't go in the bathroom because people are in there vaping. Well, that's not good.
Last question, does the sensor have, if it gets tampered with? Because I would think after a while, kids would start tampering with these. Does it?
Alarm goes off, it's tampered.
Okay,
I think it's a great idea.
sorry, I'm done.
Thank you.
Okay. I was just Googling this. I think in the state budget, they raised the vaping age to 21. So if our students are caught, do we call the CSO, or the school resource officer in? I mean,
It's currently not our practice to also do that.
okay.
So that is open for discussion. We have the option. Again, our goal is to educate, and our consequence process now includes an opportunity to reduce the first consequence from 3 days to 1 day with education and assessment. So our goal is to educate through this, but if we get up to a point where an individual may have a second or third or more violations, it may be a conversation that we want to have about including law enforcement with that conversation.
And is that the same practice if drugs are found?
It depends. It depends if it's a scheduled drug that's a felony, we have to report a felony. You know, if it's not a scheduled drug that's a felony, then you know, typically, as Randy just said, we're not in the punishment business, we're in the education business. So what can we do to help educate and modify behavior so that they're not having those repeat offenses? Again, as a high school principal, I always kind of approached it, if I got a sense that the parents were taking it seriously and were going to hold their kids accountable and there was going to be some kind of corrective measures that we were going to build towards, then maybe I didn't get law enforcement involved. If I got the sense that maybe parents weren't going to do that and that law enforcement was going to be an assistance, and we're very fortunate, again, in Delaware County, we're fortunate for a lot of reasons, but we have the best sheriff in the state of Ohio, and we have a tremendous criminal justice system that juvenile justice system that has a very good approach to how they handle rehabilitation of juveniles who are committing these offenses. So I think, you know, Judge Hemanowski's outstanding. We're going to, work with them to effectively change behavior.
And then my second question on that is, like I just said, we're not selling this in the cafeteria or at the concession stand. So what educational opportunities do we have for parents, to let them know, okay, if your child gets caught doing this, or we have these now in our bathrooms, so we're going to start disciplining per our policy, you know, so that they know, hey, I'm gonna check your backpack before you leave for school, or I'm gonna check your glove compartment. You know, if I own the car, I get to check,
Well,
you know? I mean,
again, most of the vast majority of the time when we deal with a student on a discipline incident like these things, parents are highly supportive and willing to be active partners in correcting the behavior. Very, you know, a small minority of the time, you know, it's a little disappointing when a parent, we confiscate the vape products or whatever contraband might be, we'll have a parent come back and request that it be returned to them. It's their property. But, you know, I'm sure, I told my kid, they were using space in my house. It wasn't their private, they had no private expectation of privacy, so. Just 2 action items of note, the annual approval of our bus routes, and, you know, I give our transportation department great props here. They just did a phenomenal job, especially the first 2 days when kids aren't, you know, know where they're going and all those kind of things. They have such patience. I got a great, you know, I saw a great Facebook post from a guy who was just so pleased that his child's bus driver was out running they all go out and run their routes early, and, you know, if they see people on the routes, they stop and introduce themselves and meet them, and they're such a huge part of our team. I think it was a record time. We had all buses back on the very first day by 5:12, and it's been historically 6 o'clock before the last bus got in, so that was really good. And then lastly, you have a quote there for approving a quote with Cage Excavating. We had to move a bunch of dirt that's on our property on the Bean Aller site for the county, and so when we brought them in, we also had an opportunity. They were doing some of that work, and now their amount's risen above $50,000, so we want you to have the board approval of it. We are flattening out the Bart's Mound.
God, it's about time.
Bart's
Why
Mound.
is it called the Bart's Mouth?
Because it's the dirt that came off the field from the turf project behind the visitor stands. It's just literally rendered that piece of property on a property that's already 15 or 16 acres smaller than the other high schools, useless. Now it's gonna be, yeah, that's my legacy, then so be it.
Easy come, easy go, Raj.
So it's gonna level it out and make it usable as a practice and as another piece of flat dirt, since the other pieces we've attempted to get in the past are unreached.
So we thought, since we had Cage on board for the other projects, we brought him on and got him, you know, finished that, but now it's climbed over 50,000, so it's an action item for approval. And with that, we just got, it's already, Labor Day's around the corner, and our September 12th board meeting is at the Career Center. So it'll be nice to be up there. And then our first professional development day coming up is September 16th.
Any other questions, Mr. Wright? Ms. Hatfield, treasury report, please.
Good evening. I thought I'd use the podium for our treasurer's update. It's a little unusual for me, but with our upcoming presentation, it just kind of makes sense to hang out in front at the podium, I guess. So for our general report, one of the things that I wanted to add was additional information in regards to the retirement and how do we account for that in our 5-year forecast. As Mr. Meyer mentioned, we watch that and take a look at those professionals who are at the higher end of the scale. And we do have an estimated amount in the forecast that we use to project the difference between that higher salary and the younger salary, or the lower salary coming in as we change over year. So that is accounted for and used in the 5-year forecasting process in that way. To give you an update from our department, we went to the OSBA, BASA, and OASBA legislative training that was held on August 15th. It was widely attended. We had 3 conference rooms at the Nationwide Hotel and Conference Center full of treasurers and superintendents and board members trying to understand how the new House Bill 166 funding will be rolled out. Lots of complicated issues going through there. A couple of the most important ones are the items that we have been tracking. I'll give you a highlight of. In terms of the student wellness and success funds, we talked about those as student well-being services when we talked about the implementation of the House Bill 166. It's the same functionality, just wanted to clarify those terms. And also wanted to let you know that currently the state, Ohio Department of Education and Auditor State's Office is looking at putting those as a set-aside fund, meaning we would have to code it in a 467 fund, and it would not necessarily be posted to the general fund or the 5-year forecast. So it would function more like a Fed fund or a federal grant. We would have additional reporting and planning that we would have to do and report to the Ohio Department of Education for that. But we can supplant those funds, meaning that if we have a program in place that we're using general funds to fund it, we can still use those state dollars to do that funding, which is good news. It means we don't have to create new services. We can fund part of what we've got now and expand.
So like our new contract that we just went into with Ohio State and Children's Hospital, we can use that, the new money, to pay for that?
Yes, that's
service?
something that's already in place, yes. So we could also use it for Centero and some of the other mental health services that Alicia described in her last presentation about what student wellness meant. So we've got some more information about what specific opportunities we can spend that on, specific expenditures. So we've communicated that with Mr. Fetty and his team, and we'll take a look at what we can currently roll from our current expenditures into that and what new opportunities we have with that set-aside funding.
But still, it's less than $1 million.
Oh, completely.
You know, I don't want people to think that we're rolling in the dough now, because I think it's like just over 600,000 the first year and just over 700,000 the second year.
Correct.
So, I
Right,
mean, that's
it's
the cost of
$500,000.
our Ohio State contract, which I'm glad that we signed, but.
Yes, yes. So, you know, it's wonderful to have the opportunity to enhance those without taking away from other services for our students. I think that's the positive that I would give that. We still have funds in the general fund to do other things for students and continue those operations. But you're correct, it is not a windfall. It's not going to deter us from having a levy conversation or the timing of that levy planning at all.
But with the reporting requirements, you're going to see a small uptick then in your administrative costs to administer the delivery. Do you have a feel for what that will do from your side? Is it 0.5%, 0.25%? Do you look at it that way, or do you look at it in terms of dollars? I mean, all positive money is good money, but it still comes at a cost.
I say we were looking more at it from what can we fund and how do we get our students the services. I think within our team, we could probably absorb that planning and or reporting between Dr. Fetty's team and our team. We can make sure that that happens and we stay compliant. I don't believe that it's an additional FTE or an administrative secretary to do that.
Probably should have started that way, but okay, that's good. Thank you.
You're welcome. There is some funding for growth. Within the state budget, we feel that that'll continue to just come through formula funding. That is looking at the average growth between fiscal year 16 and 19 and giving a flat rate per student on that. But again, our original estimation showed maybe $1 million to $2 million additional funds for the district. That would be general fund specific. But again, $1 million to $2 million is less than 1% of our budget. So while we're grateful we do have some growth in there, it's not going to move the needle or change our estimations and our planning.
So Emily, for clarification, the growth funding will come through as formula funding, but the wraparound services won't. So when we calculate our state funding per pupil, we would not include the money for wraparound services, but we would for growth, you know, so that we can say, you know, we get $607 per pupil from the state.
Correct.
Or whatever, okay.
Right, correct. The only other situation I think that was very unclear when we ended the conversation was, will they make an exception to pull this separate fund into the 5-year forecasting process? That was very unclear. Nobody had an answer. They didn't have a response. We had legislators in the room. We had our OASBO folks and our other groups that help support and rally for us, or talk to legislators and kind of give them a general understanding of how we practice.
Well, it's
No
only
answer.
good, it's only good for 2 years.
Right.
This money is only guaranteed for 2 years.
So in my opinion, I would say we keep it out of the, I mean, it's out of the
Yeah.
5-year forecast. It's
No,
not guaranteed to keep
I
it.
would agree with you on that.
I would agree. I mean, the auditors are still gonna have to chase it, but yeah, I think that's a good idea.
Yeah. So, again, grateful for the additional funds, but not a windfall by any stretch of the imagination. The other item that we were a little disappointed in, or glad to see it back, but the school bus purchasing funds that were quoted as being in the new House bill. Great that it's back. I believe it's $20 million for the state. The funds would not be available until the second fiscal year of the biennium budget. And of course, there's a formula that will be associated with it. That is not a one-to-one formula, meaning it's not $600 for every bus that's issued. It's formulated, I'm assuming, based on need, based on wealth, based on whatever other items they choose to put into that component. They did not have that formula available for us at the conference. So a little disappointing there. I have a feeling that that's, again, not going to be a whole lot of money for us. Again, we're tracking the moratorium on the storm shelters. We still don't have a legal opinion in writing, but we are having conversations with our attorneys about what constitutes securing funding, because the date of the moratorium goes through September of 2020, which references security of funds. Does that mean when the voted millage is in place? Does that mean when the bonds are sold? What does that security look like? I believe from the language that we saw from Attorney General Yost, forgive me, he was our current auditor, so I keep referring to his old title, I apologize for that. But from his announcement, it appeared to be that it would be the voted action. So once the ballot item was approved, we're getting that confirmed because it makes a big difference in our planning and the cost that we have going forward for Capitol building. And then finally, House Bill 305, that was the Fair School Funding Plan that we were proponents of, or that we were supporters of, by Representatives Cupp and Patterson, which took the opportunity to look at the funding formula and recreate it on a more understandable and a more, what I want to say, even keel, even base. It was fair. It took a base cost per student and added in component parts that would be able to fund ancillary services for students. It did have a component in it for wealth, but the calculation was much more understandable. Quite frankly, nobody in the state of Ohio can explain the state index right now. We know we have a percentage, we know what our percentage is, but what actually factored into that and how do I explain it to the community is beyond anybody that was at the conference to even help train us on. So, you know, with that, we were excited to see a wealth calculation that we could understand and project and take a look at and review with our community. That has been introduced as a new bill, a standalone bill. There will be legislative hearings on it. We could potentially see implementation at the second year of this biennium. Others feel that it might be 2022. When looking at, talking to our legislators that were available, Representatives Blessing and Speaker Householder felt that it might pass with further modifications. Householder was not available, but he did have a press release that mentioned that. And Senator Lehner was not optimistic about its success due to the cost of implementation. So we're still getting both sides of the sentiment on that bill. It's hard to tell whether or not it'll continue through. We will continue to work with our group of treasurers and activists that we know that are a part of that group and continue to lend our support, and you know, more to come on that as we walk through that process in the coming months. Are there any questions about those components? And then, of course, Mr. Rafe and I will be giving you a presentation on the capital planning, so I'll save some of that for that time. We do have our June board financials, which is important. That is our fiscal year end for the district. So we ended fiscal year 2019 ahead of budget. We were about $2.8 million, or approximately 1% better than we thought we would be as of the May forecast reporting, excuse me. Part of that was a revenue increase, but the biggest component of that was having expenditures coming in under budget. So we're grateful that we landed better than we thought, but again, around 1% of the budget is what it equated to. So far in July, we closed our July books. Those seem to be right on target. The only difference that we are seeing is we do collect tax advancements from Delaware County, and we did not get our final settlement within July. It will be coming actually within the next week or two. So it's been delayed due to unforeseen issues within Delaware County, but we've been assured that it will be coming within the next week. So there will be some timing delays that we'll see with that. And then of course we have board meeting minutes, amended appropriations that we are bringing forward for approval. Those again are just for, we follow Ohio Revised Code and to make sure that we are transparent in what our operations are doing. We also have donations for approval. We have just over $5,000 at Onward Text for staff and Lakeshore materials for classrooms from Monica McGardle to Oak Creek Elementary School. Donations valued around $1,500 for Shanahan Middle School football uniforms. That's an anonymous donation that was given to Shanahan Middle Athletics. And then again, just over $5,000 for an assistant football coach, a quarter girls assistant tennis coach from Olentangy Liberty Athletic Boosters to Olentangy High School. So we are very grateful for all of those donations. And of course, we're always grateful to our community for in-kind donations and their valuable time as they support our students throughout our buildings and athletic events. And finally, we have the approval of the wellness service agreement with Mount Carmel. As you may remember, we have been working with Mount Carmel for our staff wellness program for the last 3 years. We were able to get a multi-year contract with them for the same price that we have had since we've been working with them at that $7.90 per staff member. That gives them access to an online portal for tracking exercise activities. They can report their information there to help us stay on track, help us monitor our own progress. But it also gives them an opportunity to have a biometric screening each and every year. So they know their base numbers, they know where their health issues may be. If a health issue comes out of that at a critical measure, Mount Carmel will recommend that they go see their physician immediately, or perhaps if it's that dire, maybe the emergency room. We've been very fortunate, no one has had that happen to date, which is great. So our staff is getting better about being aware of their overall health and wellness, and we continue to have those conversations. But also with that, we get a wellness coach. So we have an actual staff person who comes and works within our buildings to offer exercise classes, educational opportunities, and other events to help staff relax, keep their mind on work, be able to help create that work-life balance within the buildings so that they are able to service our students to the best of their abilities. So we're recommending that we continue to work with Mount Carmel so we can keep that continuity going and appreciate the relationships that our wellness coach has created with our staff members across the district. And with that, I will take any questions about the treasurer action items. Yes.
Question. It's about the Mount Carmel services.
Yes.
It says that we pay per staff member registered. How many did we have last year? Do you know?
So we had approximately, I want to say 1,600 to 1,700 staff members. We pay per monthly registration, which kicks off with the biometric screening enrollment. So that triggers the registration enrollment, and then they have access to the classes and everything else throughout the year with that amount. That amount covers the portal, the wellness coach, and any ancillary services that come through there, through the exercise classes, having a dietitian come aboard, and those types of things. We do have within our contract with Medical Mutual, they provide $100,000 for wellness components, and we use those funds to help offset almost all, it covers most of this bill from Mount Carmel. It's not completely, but it covers most of it.
Is there an incentive for employees to participate, like they get a reduced rate on their premiums?
It is not connected to our premiums because we are Section 125 tax-free, or it reduces their gross income so they don't have to pay tax on it. Because of that nature, we have to watch what we do with our premiums. We are not allowed to offer premium incentives and a tax-free premium, so to speak. So what we do is offer gift cards or incentive gift type situations where if they go and get their biometric screening, there's a gift card available as they walk out the door. If we hit a 60% participation level or higher, they can have another one. And then at the end of the calendar year, if they're meeting their metrics to continue to have their wellness checks, participate in exercise, etc., they can earn another one. You're welcome.
All right, any public participation?
No, there is none. Thank
So
you.
then roll right into the discussion item, the bond levy planning discussion.
Absolutely.
Mr. Schwartzman.
All right. This is where it gets interesting. Sure. No. So, thank you again. I expect you to take copious notes. I'm looking forward to your article on this. All right. All right, again, well, thanks for the opportunity to, I think, what we're beginning to plan here is potentially the next very important phase of our history. So this discussion is important. The goals are going to be for us to address our continued aggressive enrollment growth while we're addressing our overall capacity needs and the long-term needs of the district. And I think you'll find throughout this discussion a purposeful alignment to our strategic plan. So with that, I just want to start by looking at our enrollment growth. As Todd had already mentioned, we are now over 22,000 students with our 457 preschool students, 6,900 high school kids, over 5,000 middle school, and over 10,000 elementary school students. We're looking across the board as, everybody has a packet there to look at the small numbers, but there are significantly larger class sizes all throughout the district than what we've ever been used to. And again, it's a typical, I'll say, correct that, what we're used to, but it's what we're used to as we build into the next building phase. We've always tried to stretch that capacity. I really appreciate Mr. O'Brien's summary of the things we've tried to do to not open a new elementary school. The last elementary school we opened was Heritage in 11, 12. So it's a long time, and we've gained a lot of kids since 11, 12. I think it is important to note we added the 12 classrooms at Shanahan and the 18 classrooms with the additions this year. Again, that's the equivalent of 30 additional classroom spaces without increasing operating costs of a unique building. So again, we've stretched this for as long as we could, just like we did with the high school. Back in 2016, 15, it was around this time in 2015 when we started talking about our last issue. As we indicated, we're 123 over projections. That's phenomenal job by our facilities committee to plan for those enrollment projections, to miss by 123 over, and you see that grade level distribution. And again, as Todd indicated, it's difficult to really accurately plan exactly where they're moving in, to what attendance boundary, and at what grade level when we have those new students. So the enrollment is real. I wanted to provide this slide, and it's the most impactful part of the visual of the slide is the red. This is simply our enrollment roll-up by building, but it doesn't include any growth. These are just existing students we have in the district, and if they stay in their current attendance boundary and just grade advance through the district. So we are now in year 2019, moving forward through 2020 and beyond. You see a lot of red in there. Now, on the chart, Olentangy Meadows, by that chart, says it has 766 students. The enrollment report you just saw has Meadows at 679 students. That's because this chart wasn't reflective of the 90 students we redistricted out of Meadows 2 years ago, and the 45 students we redistricted out of them this year. So if you take 766 minus 135, you come down to 631. But as I said, they have 679. That's because a lot of the people that we moved, and these are all apartments in the south end of the district, we moved to Glen Oak 1 year, and Allen Creek this year, Freedom Trail, and then Glen Oak. They moved back into apartments that are still assigned to Meadows, so they can stay in Meadows. So that was about 30 kids. So, but again, you see a lot of red. Arrowhead currently is at 706 students. Enrollment goes up to about 758. Heritage is at 667 in a 5-year span, goes up to 760. Johnny Cake is at 710. It goes up to about 800 in 2024. And Tyler Run, 703, grows up to about 717 and then flattens out a little bit. But again, again, this doesn't include any growth in those attendance areas, because our enrollment projections just do not enable us to do that.
Why does it peak in 2024? And then 2025, everything comes down?
Well, it peaks there just given what our current attendance is. And if you look at the grade level bands of where we have those,
Then when the current kindergarten goes out to 6th grade?
right. So, but again, these numbers don't include, I tried to look at it in a way to apply the normal, like what we would say would be our normal growth factor by grade level, by building, and work it into those formulas that are in the spreadsheets, and I'm just not that Excel savvy. But I think again, is looking at the chart from a color visual, all the red areas indicate where we're over capacity. So just from a total elementary division perspective with growth, again, we're at 10,135 by our enrollment projections. The actual number in elementary is 10,116. So we're about 20 below that, or off from that right there. But we're projecting 2,498 students in the elementary division in the next 10 years, an increase of 25%. From right now to 21-22, we're going to grow by 607 students, and over the next 10 years, obviously, as you said, 25% growth in the elementary division. As you've seen before in the facilities report, this is an analysis of where we are from the classroom space standpoint. Todd had said 5 available classrooms. There are actually, we did do the 18 additions. There are actually 15 spaces in the district available for classrooms, but we are already using throughout the district 10 spaces are being used for classrooms in areas that were non-classroom spaces. So that's where we say there's 5 available. So we're saying now that elementary capacity right now is at 99%, and that's despite the additions of the 18 elementary classrooms this year and 12 from Shanahan. And again, a big driver in that has been increased additions of our specialized learning center classrooms, increase in preschool classrooms. I think the 457 is one of the highest numbers we started preschool at.
It's got it, yeah, it's got it.
So, you know, that just those spaces keep continuing to eat into our capacity. Obviously, here in the short term, we're going to have to address we may have to address some of the imbalance in our sizes, because we do have some capacity, and you know, we do have 4 buildings that are under 600, so we do have some capacity in it. We may have to do some adjustments, but there are no easy answers in that, from that, and they're not really long-term solutions when you're talking about 25% enrollment growth in the next 10 years. At the middle school level, again, you do see in this model a high in the year 2026 of 5,922 middle school students, and then it does drop in the out years, but again, this does not include any growth. You see Berkshire Middle School over capacity, and then Liberty, and again, the capacity we're using for the middle schools is 1,100 across the board, and with 5,500 total middle school students. And again, I think this visual shows the need. Just as a side note, throughout the entire region of Central Ohio, there are 5 middle schools that are over 1,000 students. So it's just not typical for middle schools to be 1,000 students. We have 3 of them.
That's counting those? I was just going to say, that's counting ours, so we have 3 of them.
Dublin, Davis, and Delaware Willis are over, are over 1,000.
Well, do all districts do the same grade breakdowns? Some do a junior high versus middle?
Yeah, that's a comparison of 6/8.
Yeah, there's a comparison to 6/8, so. You know, so regardless of whether or not, so, you know, again, when we do apply the growth factor to our middle school enrollment, you see that we are projecting in the next 10 years an additional 1,240 middle school students. And the enrollment projections don't show that same decline that just grade level enrollment shows. So we're looking at middle school population of 6,300 in the year 2029. Again, we said that our capacity for the middle school is around 5,500, and we hit that at 5,474 in the 2023-2024 school year. So that's why we're having a discussion about a 6th middle school.
The spread between historical and projected growth here, like 67% versus 24, just seems out of whack to what we saw in elementary. If you go back a couple slides, you're expected to projected spread is only, you're actually expected to grow slower in the next 10 years than it did in the last 10 years.
I think that's, there are those, economy, the days of, like you said, we grew by 453. That's the lowest number of kids we've grown in a long time. The enrollment projections has the historical enrollment from what was the first year we put it on there, 1979 or something. But
78.
that was, the difference now is that if you look at all of our grade level bands all throughout the district, and you really can't really look at K because of the number of people who don't attend, who actually live here, but our current senior class is 1,624. And then we have 1711, 1778, 1772, 1748, 1650. They're all across the board in that 1650. So the years we had real explosive growth of 1,000 students, that was because we were graduating 400 kids in the district back in 2003 when I got here. And we had 1,400 first graders come in. So that was the year, those were the years and we did that for quite a while. And now, we're just not graduating that number. So the growth is new people coming into the district, it's kind of just leveled out. But as the facilities committee does in looking at their building permits, and I'm not sure where we are with building permits this year, but drive along. I put a lot of miles on driving around the district, and there are a lot of houses going up.
Well, it's not only houses, unlike neighborhoods in like Upper Arlington or Bexley, where you don't have kids anymore in some of those neighborhoods. We see in Green Meadows and High Meadows, even my neighborhood, the Villages of Oak Creek, as those kids graduate and people move out, new families are moving in. Like my neighbor, she hadn't had she had 3 kids, but her youngest hadn't been in elementary school since 2006. Well, okay, so there weren't any kids going to Oak Creek from her house since 2006. Well, she moved out, a family with 2 elementary kids moves in, and so now they're at Oak Creek, so those are 2 new kids at Oak Creek. They weren't replacing anybody because it's been, several years since her kids were there, but you see that turnover too. It's not just new builds, it's the people moving into the existing homes that are bringing kids that are populating the schools that we didn't have kids in before.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting dynamic we're going to have to closely monitor. I think by and large, the majority, back in the day when we were building 1,400 homes a year or 1,100 home starts or whatever it was all brand new people of the area.
Right.
It wasn't, but now we've got this people already here in the district with kids, moving into a new home and keeping their kids here and turning around and selling it, which is kind of having a doubling effect in some regards.
Like we can measure the yield of an apartment complex. We should be able to measure yield by neighborhood, right?
We have.
We should be able to track that over time and see if there's movement.
Mm-hmm. And that was in, if you remember, Scott gave us that student potential analysis, and it was overtime, and it's there's a price point of the community.
So we went through the High Meadow Green Meadow for a while. When that was rolled over in an effective.
And he showed back, and we could have him back in to update us on that, but he showed over time how like a High Meadows, Green Meadows was the highest yield development in the district, and then it aged out and what we get from them over time. And then Highland Lakes, and Highland Lakes has gone to a lower yield district. I think the phenomenon of people, there was a lot of people who, back in the day, they'd have their kids and they'd leave. Now more and more are staying, and they're staying in their homes because there really weren't a lot of options available for them to move into and stay in the area, be close to families and those kind of things. And now you see what a lot being built are patio homes, empty nesters, condos, all those kind of products, because people want to stay in the area because there's amenities to stay in the area. That's fine. I'm more than happy to have people in the properties that don't have kids living in them. So again, you saw this back with our facilities report, the projected need, and again, it shows in 24, 25, 23, 24 where we are. The capacity, we say we can always cram more kids into classrooms and have higher class sizes, which is never ideal, but it's doable. But we really do come into a lot of constraints when we talk about our arts, our elective classes, art, music, physical education, all the things that are really important parts of our academic program, and our capacity at lunch, in the lunchrooms and those kind of things. So the middle schools, again, just big. while we're not going to talk about high school in this presentation, because we addressed it in our last issue, I want to make sure I at least touch on high school enrollment and what we did in our last redistricting. As you can see, we are scheduled to grow by 1,306 high school students in the next 10 years. Again, a flattening out because we have all these class sizes are all pretty much the same size, not as much as we grew in the last 10 years, but our high schools are, even though we brought Berlin online, our high schools are still very large schools. So, current enrollment at Liberty's 2,100, Orange is 2,100, Olentangy's 1,400, and Berlin's 1,300. And I know there's been some community comment about the redistricting and about the fact that especially Orange and especially Liberty are still large. But I think what's really important for the community to know and hear is that had we not been built Berlin, they would be significantly larger. So if you take those numbers in the out years and divide them by 3 instead of 4, you're looking at 2,600 student high schools as opposed to 1,900 student high schools. So again, in the out years here, our high schools will continue to be big. The redistricting we put in place was a long-term plan. We could have moved more kids out of Liberty and out of Orange, but as we all know, nobody raised their hand and volunteered.
Right.
But the likelihood would have been we would have had to move them back because the areas pointing to Olentangy and pointing to Berlin are the high growth, fast growth areas. So what we wanted to do was implement a slow decline at Liberty and at Orange, and both of them are pointing down under 2,000 in the next 2 years. Liberty should stabilize under 1,900, and Orange will stabilize just under 2,000 in the 1,950 range. Berlin is projected to grow to be bigger than both of those, because again, that's where all the growth is pointed. Olentangy will be the smallest high school, but it'll grow to be 1,900 again in the next 10 years. So, while we're not talking about another high school for certain, we're also not talking about having small high schools here in the future. So, so in addition to the buildings, what we're talking about from the standpoint, what I asked our leadership team to have conversations with our directors and our building principals about all of our facilities and all of the facility needs we have across the district. Because I think we have an opportunity to, while obviously we have an opportunity to address our capacity issues at elementary and middle school, we also have an opportunity to address all of our buildings, some of which are 20 years old, to address technology, to address educational learning environments, and create equity throughout our facilities across the district. So with that, I'll turn it over to Mrs. Hatfield to talk about the money part of it.
Thank you. So as Mr. Rake mentioned, we have a very real and continued growth and capacity situation. Based upon our capacity needs, we are anticipating the need for 2 elementaries and a middle school over the next 5 years. So the big question comes into mind, how do we pay for this? What does this look like for our financial situation? How do we pay for facilities when we have needs for such expansion? So we take a look at our debt capacity, and what you see before you on the screen is our current debt. Outstanding par is the actual, what would be considered principal. So if you're thinking about it in terms of a home mortgage, your principal amount and your interest amount is what you have to pay. But the outstanding par is essentially the outstanding principal on a home mortgage. It's just called a different terminology because it's a bond. So we currently have just over, or just under rather, $351 million in outstanding par on bonds. And for the district in the next fiscal year, we'll have approximately $15.8 million roll off of that outstanding par. And then the following year, we'll have an additional $32 million roll off of that par.
When will the 15.8 million roll off? And then
So 15.8 million we will pay in fiscal year 20, our current fiscal year. And then we'll pay another 32 million of that in fiscal year 21. Okay, so what we look at when we see these long-term projections and needs for building, we want to know where do we stand today? Where do we stand by the time we need to issue more debt to pay for another facility and get it constructed on time? And so we take a look at this outstanding par value and know if we have that much debt rolling off, the conversation becomes how much debt can we put back onto the schedule in later years and not increase our effective millage rate. So we've had those conversations. We've been studying this and looking at this for almost 6 to 9 months now, making sure that we understand where we are at with our total outstanding debt capacity. We also study our market conditions. What are the current interest rates? What is the market doing with interest rates? We also study how the obligations or how bonds are being sold on the market. Are general obligation bonds being picked up quickly? Are they still being sold fast on the market? Generally speaking, general obligation bonds are a safe and secure investment because they're issued by municipalities and school districts, so that they're good on their debt, they're gonna make their debt payments, and the bond holders will actually get paid for their bonds. So it's considered a really low-risk investment, but a really nice investment for those out on the market. So is that steady condition still out there? We also consider our property valuation, our assessed property valuation. As we talk about this, when we look at the 5-year forecast, we look at the total valuation for the district and the growth within that property valuation to assess where we will be in each out year of those 5 years. So we take that assumed growth, which is roughly 2%, and we apply it to our valuation to look at that. The reason we look at the assessed valuation is because as the valuation grows again, that allows for more debt capacity at the same effective millage rate because the valuation has increased and created more room within that effective millage model. And then of course we look at our collection rates. How much of our revenue are we actually collecting year over year? Traditionally we average about 97% on both residential and commercial. Our assumptions assume that we are about 96%. So we've given ourselves a conservative cushion in those assumptions to make sure that we're not overestimating our capacity in general to add more into this. So having said all of that, we feel that we have approximately $170 million that we can put into our debt capacity at a staggered rate and fund the ability to construct 2 elementaries, an additional middle school, and some additional needs, as Mark mentioned, when we talk about looking at our aging buildings, what's out there and what do we need to do for those buildings.
And that's at our reduced debt millage rate.
Yes.
Come on.
Yes, we dropped approximately, I think it was 1 or 1.6 mils this last year or so because we have been looking at our debt year over year. We've been refunding bonds, we've been reselling them on the market or refinancing them with lower interest rates, just as you would your home mortgage, to make sure that we're taking the cost of our debt and minimizing it as much as possible, which again allows that growth capacity to come in and we can take better advantage of that.
Emily, I have a question on the first slide.
This one?
Yeah, where you have the dated, these are all the bonds. We don't have any bonds prior to 2010 because they've been paid off.
Because we've refunded them or
Yeah,
we've
or
paid them
paid
off.
off.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. And this includes, you'll notice the 9.5 that we just did in
We were not
18.
issuing a lot of bonds.
Yes.
Well, and
Yes.
we've been aggressive in refunding.
Oh, absolutely.
Yes, we-
Taking
yeah.
advantage of declining rates.
And we had probably, I believe in 2016, we had the new issuance and probably 2 refundings before Mr. Kern left. And I believe our department has handled 3 or 4 since I've been in the seat. So we've really been aggressive in taking advantage of the low market interest rate environment and getting those refunded. We've also taken advantage of refunding like the BABS bonds that we had to make sure that we weren't losing state refunds on things like that. So we watched this pretty closely to make sure we were in a really good situation overall.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Are there other questions about that slide before I go on? Thank you. So the projects that we are considering and looking at this time are, of course, the new elementary 1 and new elementary 2, and new middle school. We are looking at security vestibules for the remaining buildings that don't have them, which would be 11 elementaries, 2 middle schools, and of course the high schools. We're looking at high school improvements for collaborative spaces. That's been one of the things about Berlin High School that has been very well received and is needed in the other high schools, is to get the collaborative space opened up and available for the students. Media center conversions, and broadcast journalism space. That has been an interest that is growing, and of course it needs different technology and components in it to make it successful for the students. At our middle schools, we are looking at collaborative space for them, opening up opportunities for them to have that need to get together and talk about and work on projects in large groups. In our elementary division, we're looking at playground updates, talking about ADA compliance and safety issues. I apologize, that cut off on the slide. But we're talking about handicap accessibility and safety. Meaning making sure that the equipment is up to date and that there are some soft surfaces under the playground equipment, so should the students fall, the injuries are minor, if at all. Adding sensory space, of course adjusting media centers, they're just not used the way they were when those buildings were designed and opened. With transportation, we're looking at the West Center expansion, making sure that we have enough parking spaces for the new bus and all of the driving that occurs on that side of the district. We have Hyatt's and Liberty Tree bus lanes and additional buses. And then we have our general needs, which are Hyatt Athletic Field parking, expansion, mechanical, and roofing. Some of the mechanical is on there. You might ask why that's on there, as we have a House Bill 264 project, but these are things that are not included in that project that would still need to be addressed. And then, of course, the administrative office facility. As you may know, we are leasing the current building that we're in now, so we would be looking at purchasing that facility. And the costs that we have reviewed these with our facilities committee in terms of the elementary and the middle school. Those are based on roughly $238 per square foot, which is, I know that they have studied what the market rate is, looking at other building components around the area, other districts that are building. So we've used that rough estimate to date. I know they are looking at refining that number and making adjustments if needed. So those numbers might change slightly as we move forward, but those are the estimates that we have to date. Of course, the security vestibules, we've talked about what that looks like in the planning for those. We are very excited to have that as part of the package and getting those installed. And you, of course, can read through the rest of the items there. I'm happy to take any questions you have about those items. Yes. We'll go around the table.
So just as a summary,
Yes.
our bond council has said we could go out for 170 million, but this cost is just a little over 126 million.
Correct. So we're not putting items on here that are maxing out the full amount that we could issue. We're trying to be responsible with that capacity and use what we feel is needed. The dates that you see would be our estimations on when we would actually issue the debt to make sure that we have funds on hand to complete the projects based on our timeline for opening the schools. And then also when we would have the staff put together and finish the other remaining projects. Those could flex a little bit, I believe, in that 2023 range. Could maybe be pulled into 2022, but for now, we're looking at kind of stepping that out to make sure we're not, we have the time and the ability to get all of those projects finished and completed well. But those could be changed and would still be within our debt capacity and our ability to issue that debt.
Just for clarification, that's not 5 buses at $1 million a bus, it's 12 buses a year for 5 years at $89,000 a bus.
It's 5 years of buses. Sorry, thank you. I get a little ahead of myself on the units, I apologize. Yes, Dave.
With the general needs and maybe some of the transportation, are those permanent improvement items really PIs?
There are some items that could be PI. They are not currently within our PI budget, the 1 mil that we have that is strictly set aside for permanent improvement. When we're looking at these projects, we're trying to take a look at items that that are lasting longer than just your 10, your 5-year time frame. These are investments that would last 10 to 20 years, which makes sense to take them into a longer funding window.
Okay.
So those are like in the mechanicals and roofing, are actually 20 to 30-year items. So they're longer phases. So what we traditionally have done in the district was build bond dollars into short-term expenditures or use bond residual funds for our entire permanent improvement budget prior to 2016 when we put a mill of PI in. That mill of PI now is collecting $3.6 million. But that budget also includes our technology needs and the permanent improvement capital needs that we have. So that fund is tight, and we are constantly having to reprioritize depending on when things come up. So we feel that if we can add, because we have the capacity, can add a little bit of into a bond package for things that will last. There were times we were buying curriculum out of bond funds and technology out of bond funds. It just
Right, it doesn't match the length that we have to carry the debt and pay the interest on it.
But you're still with this package, still gonna have to look for an increase.
I think that's part of, this is the first phase, as we talked about phasing this discussion in with, obviously, you, the board, and then, having it in public, in front of our community, the opportunity, and to be completely transparent, to get these things out here. There's the bond dollar piece of it, and as Emily's indicated, we have the capacity for a no new millage bond issue. So these items that we are adding to our district and enhancing the quality of all of our schools throughout the district will not raise taxes. But there's always the operating side of, if we're gonna have a bond issue and build new buildings, we're gonna need operating dollars to fund those buildings. We don't want to make a mistake that some other districts have made, build a building, don't get the operating funds to open them, and the buildings, they said, they didn't open.
Right.
So, that's why, we feel this is a responsible package. It gets what we prioritize as needs, not wants. There were other items people brought forward that did not become, rise to the level of getting on the list. I think that, in conjunction with the operating side of that, we need to have that discussion about should we add to our PI funds. A mill of PI will raise about $4.2 million now. If you combine it with the other 3.6 and 4.2, 7.8, I think long-term that would take care of the district for a very, very long time. That's the next discussion.
I have a list of questions.
Go for it.
Okay. This, in this proposal, it keeps Shanahan, so we would.
Correct.
So did we ever consider like tearing down Shanahan and building, because that building was built in 1954, tearing that down and making a bigger middle school? Or do we need it because we need it for capacity?
Well, if we, again, if we tear it down and build a bigger one, we don't believe, we academically don't believe 1,200, 6 through
It's already the largest middle school, correct?
Right.
Right.
So we don't believe academically 1,200
And
or
I'm asking
1,400.
questions that people have asked of me.
You're right. So you're right, that's fine. And so, we believe at this time Shanahan still has useful life. It is well maintained. There are parts of it that make it a unique building. The biggest constraint on Shanahan is the cafeteria space, and it's not like the other buildings.
But it has 2 gyms.
But from a capacity standpoint, it still is a serviceable building, and I think it still has a useful life. Getting the 6th middle school online that address our capacity needs and get our middle school populations down to a level of between 950 and 1,000, I think is in the better interest of the children of this district. My guess of what would happen in the future is that some issue in the future does exactly what you're saying. There is space, there is space on the Shanahan property to construct to reconstruct Shanahan Middle School on that property, and then demo Shanahan, and that we have 6 middle schools. I don't know in the long-term projections whether or not 7 middle schools would be warranted. I'm certainly not going to, not.
Or you take it offline as maybe we level out.
If we go into a
But I'm talking like 30, that's 25, 30 years down the road.
But there's those things, I think, long-term, I don't know that if we had the bond capacity, what's the number for middle school? 49 million.
49.
I don't see the bond capacity to do that right now. Or we have to take off other items that, again, we see as priorities, as opposed to, tearing down a building that still has now they typically say the useful life of 100 years. You look at, in Shanahan, it's block walls, it has terrazzo floors, there's a lot of good parts to it that are still workable.
Not in the context of this document, but the Facilities Committee has addressed that question before.
And I'm not asking for commitments tonight, but can you tell us all where the possible land for these buildings is? I mean, I know we have donated land in Evans Farm, and then we have purchased land for future growth. So can you tell us where this land is?
So we have 2 sites on the west side of the district, north of, obviously north of Liberty High, Beanoller and Bunty Station. Those 2 sites are elementary sites. We have a elementary/middle school site on Curd and Sweeney that we purchased years ago. We have a commitment from Evans Farm for donated land. We have a slab next to Berkshire that we could put an elementary school on. And I'm also working with other developers who are bringing other projects online that would like to have an elementary or middle school site in their developments, because having a school site is attractive. I think it's prudent as we go forward, as we make the decision of what we're going to do and when we're going to be on, it's more prudent to pinpoint next March where that's going to be with watching the continued enrollment growth and fluctuations. Because ideally, I would like for whenever we open any school, there to be minimal impact from a redistricting standpoint. So if we're able to target a school site into an area where schools are already at capacity or pushing over capacity, to me it makes more sense to put a school site in that area and draw from already overcrowded schools, as opposed to just putting it out in the hinterland and then busing people out there for the sake of having it in one location or the other. I'd rather put it where we have ideally we need it in the south end of the district where we have all this population density, but there's no.
We don't have any land.
But we do have, we are working there are multiple sites, so it's really difficult to pinpoint it right now.
Okay, the soonest that we would be on the ballot, March 17th, 2020?
Yeah, the timeline needs to be.
That's the primary people, it's already been set, that's how I know that.
Yes, and we have a slide on some of those components of timing that we will get to and go over. If you don't mind, I'll wait. If there are other questions, we'll go through those.
I can wait on my last question too, toward the end.
Okay,
That's your
thank
last
you. Are there any other questions about
Well, and these prices don't reflect the cost of land. They're with the assumption that we have the land.
Correct,
Or it'll be done.
correct.
Again, just from a comparison standpoint, Upper Arlington had a $200 million bond issue that I think had an increase of 2-point-something mils. Dublin had a $170 million bond issue. I think Westerville's going to be on in the fall for over $100 million again. So, I think that obviously the uniqueness of us having to be able to do the no new millage, what I was explaining to me in that regard is that kind of keeps that debt collection rate, instead of just allowing all this debt to fall off, and people move in here now and they enjoy these beautiful facilities, but they never really paid for them. It ensures that people who come in the future will pay for the facilities that we have or are going to have in the future. And it's a good message to say from a fairness standpoint.
Thank you. And with this, we want to talk about our strategic plan, of course. As we look through our strategic plan, our goals touch on all of the components that are a part of this. We're talking about managing facilities. We're talking about operational excellence. We're talking about making sure that we are fiscally responsible and transparent. And so all of the things that we've discussed tonight help us meet our strategic goals and our strategic plans and move forward in that regard. We don't want to have facilities where we are no longer able to meet our ratios. We don't want to have facilities where our students are too crowded to get into lunch periods. We want to make sure that we can service our students in the way that we have been, and that our students coming into the district have the same wonderful experience that our current students have. So we are aligning what we're doing with the strategic plan to be fiscally responsible, transparent, and not issuing more debt than we feel that we need, rather than what we want. With that, we'll move right into the timeline. I hope this answers some of your questions, Mrs. Fiesel, but if not, please feel free to jump in. So this is a rough timeline or general timeline that we put together based upon what we had done with our previous issue in 2016. That issue was promised to last 3 years. We are having it will last 4. Looking at our capacity and where we would like to have the elementaries open, we are projecting that we need to be on the March 17th ballot item for a vote. And then the timeline underneath takes a look at our 5-year forecast. How do we look at our operations? How do we look at our planning tools to set millage rates with our operating needs, and additional ballot items being maybe potentially another PI mill, putting that together with this capital plan, and then looking at all of the things that we have to file. Olentangy is a special needs district in terms of debt issuance. Typically, we've talked about this in the past, but typically schools will be allowed to issue at a 9% of their valuation, and we are currently over that. So we will need to redo that calculation and file with the state to show that we have the ability to still pay it based on our valuation and our valuation growth, and that we can cover that debt issuance, but it's just part of the technical process of making sure that we're in compliance with the sale of the bonds. And then, of course, you can see the resolutions, Delaware County Auditor millage certification, and all of those things that we have to do. So what this would do, it would get us to a November timeframe, and we would have to have the board take action on passing the resolution for need and passing the ballot language itself. We would file all of that within December and then be in campaigning mode from that November timeframe up to the March election.
So we have to make a decision.
October, November.
Mm-hmm. Correct.
I have a question about the special needs resolution.
Yes.
Does that ever get denied? Like, has that happened to districts before? Because I mean, if we can't get funded by the state and we don't qualify for their funding.
For their funding.
Programs,
How else are we gonna do it?
is there any risk of that?
No, I don't believe there is for Olentangy, because if you think about it, we don't qualify for the state because we are too rich. I mean,
Right.
honestly, that's how they look at us. Your property valuation is too high, your median income is too high, your community can afford to raise taxes for the operations of your schools. So clearly, we can afford to pay the debt to build the building. There is a calculation that we have to do, and we have to satisfy, but we've been through drafts of that with our bond council already, and I don't feel that we won't meet that need.
So how many times, we filed this a number of times now, right?
Yes,
I mean, ever since I've been on the board, every time we issue, we have to file for special needs, so. it's kind of
Yes.
become
I mean, our debt capacity is large, but we've also been the fastest growing district in the state of Ohio for a long time running. I mean, it's the same conversation we have with state funding. It just doesn't keep up with how many kids we get every year. We don't have we can't keep our debt low enough to keep up with our facility needs for all of those students. But we are operating within state law, and I think that we will be able to continue to do that and get that special needs resolution filed and passed and be in compliance to be able to issue the debt.
And the only good thing to come out of growth, high property value is the ability to go on no new millage.
Right.
True.
Right.
True.
That's
Yeah.
Right,
not many districts can even do that.
correct, correct. And we feel that we can issue this debt and stay within our 7.5 mils debt limit effective rate that we have right now. Our voted rate is higher than that, but our effective rate is 7.5. And, you know, the only difference that we will see with this issuance that we maybe haven't seen in the past is that the homestead and rollback credits are no longer available to taxpayers
That's right.
on any issuance, whether that's any voted millage
Right.
after 2014. So it did not impact our 2016 levy campaign. That had the same implications that this one will, and it passed by 58%. So yes, we know those credits are gone, but our community has been very supportive even without that.
Is that
Can I
your
make
last
it a
one?
last question?
Is that your last slide? Okay. Can I put you on the spot?
Sure.
Give me a ballpark of what we're looking at for operating.
No.
Is it too soon to have that discussion?
I think, you know, it's
I'll,
gonna-
I'll I'll answer it for somewhere between 0 and our last levy request.
great.
That's pretty good.
That's good answer.
You know, again.
Which was 5.9.
No, it was
Or
6.9.
yeah.
Yeah, operating was
6.9 plus
5.9.
1.
Yes.
You know, and again, when you look at the millage from last time was 5.9 for operations, and you look at the number, the cost per pupil, what, like, you know, as Mr. Ryan said, 453 new students, it's $5 million new dollars a year, $5 million, you need an additional $5 million a year just for the new kids and the new staff, and that's just, that's at the base level, no inflationary increases, no any enhancements to any kind of programs, it's just keeping the lights on, servicing the new kids, so, you know, you're looking at, you know, 4 mills roughly just for, maybe 4.5 mills just for new growth, just for the new kids, over a 3-year period. So, you know, as we always do, we try to come up with a number that's a 3 to 4-year number that will stretch to 4 or see how long we can stretch it. You know, I think as Mrs. Hatfield's going update the five-year forecast. There's a lot of factors that come into play with that. And it's prudent to decide, make the decision. I mean, if you decide we don't want to build any elementary schools or middle school, then we don't have to factor those into the ask.
But then where do you put the kids?
No? But that's,
But we will have a levy scenario discussion,
Yes.
10/24 would be when we'll have that discussion.
and I think that'll all start to, come together as the forecast is coming together in that October timeframe. We are able to do preliminary modeling and see what it looks like. So I think it's,
Emily, I just have a question for you. Do you think that by the time we get to that discussion, that we will have an opinion from council on the storm shelters?
Yes.
So the elementary schools, for those that don't know, that's going to be between $800,000 and $1 million of additional building costs for the elementaries. Elementaries, is that right,
Two
Sharon?
elementaries?
Each.
Each.
You don't have to have it for middle school?
Well, I don't, you would if it passes, but I don't think we know what that cost is, because have we looked at that cost for the middle school? I don't think we.
Typically would be about the same.
Well, that's based on capacity. Well, that's true. It depends on, are we gonna put 600 kids or 1,000 kids? It may go up a little, but I mean, that's a fair number, about $1 million, plus or minus.
Right, I would imagine that we'll have that opinion soon. If Yost is willing to put out additional information, then our council will typically, they'll have a general sense of what that means and can kind of cut through the legalese that I have conjecturally looked at. So we'll continue to ask and make sure that we get that before we get into the October timeframe where we're looking at operating.
So the point of that, I guess, is if we do not have a solid opinion by the time we go forward, we could add those numbers in, and if the dollars are not used, they're not used. So I think it's just something we have to
Correct.
think about as a hard cost that's outside of inflation.
which is, that's what we have the capacity to do that.
Correct.
Correct.
So,
And we could add it to,
And
yes.
then not, and
And then
then
not
just
issue
choose
the
not
debt.
to use that.
Absolutely, we don't, if we take to the ballot, just as an example, $150 million to say we're gonna have that voted in, and we find that we need the 126, we issue the debt for 126.
Correct,
We do
yes,
not
right.
issue the debt for that $30 million difference if we do not need it.
Same example for everyone is what just happened on the 3 additions, is that had
Correct.
been issued, it was not, and we didn't issue the debt until we did the 3 additions to the schools.
Correct.
So I just think that's something we may want to, if we don't get a strong opinion, we should probably consider that as part of the overall ask.
The other thing I want to point out is if we go on on March 17, 2020, and yes, they did do it on St. Patrick's Day for a purpose. I can get into that later. But we don't start collecting any additional money on the operating or PI, whatever we decide to do, until that next tax year, until
Correct.
January that next year.
Correct. So the tax collections run on a calendar year. So we would have first half collections in January, second half collections would be July and August. So what happens is we would see a half a year collections in the first fiscal year, and then a full collection in the next fiscal year as you collect, the January and the summer timeframe.
And also, I want to remind people that we were last on in 2016. At that time, the board promised that we would make it last 3 years. It's going to last 4 years. So we have been fiscally responsible.
It'll be 5 with 4 years.
5 when we start going around collecting
Or
it.
when we vote, 5 would be collected.
Right, 4 when we vote, 5 when we collect.
Correct.
So I guess consistent with that question, how long will we maybe we'll have that discussion in October. We need to be prepared to articulate how long this next request will last.
Yeah, it's actually 4 because we didn't collect till 2017. Because we were on in March of 2016.
By the way, it exceeds the promise we made of 3 years.
Right.
And, I think it's, regardless, when you look at our 5-year forecast, this issue isn't about operating needs. We're not, which is a different scenario than we've been in the past. We've always been at the absolute cliff. We're a year ahead of that, but the significance of that is it enables us, so really the issue is more about the building needs, because we need the building to open in 2021 in order, because we are significantly out of space. We can stretch it for next school year and raise class sizes. But this all comes back to not asking until you absolutely need it. And so from an operating needs standpoint, it could be said we don't need operating dollars to make it through that next fiscal year, but we're going to.
Yeah.
And so it enables us to ask for less upfront. Because if we wait, it doesn't matter. The need is there. The longer you wait, the higher it
you have
goes.
to ask.
So,
Cost goes up.
Yeah.
and equivalent, the equivalency, you will end up paying the same, whether you pay $4.9 the first early or $7 later, you're gonna.
Well, and we do not want to ask our voters to vote twice.
Right.
Right, we are very conscientious about that voter fatigue. We don't want to have multiple items back to back. That's an administrative issue as well as a voter issue.
So I guess, just out of, as you think about discussing it or reflecting about it, are there things on the list you don't, you're less opposed to? Are there things on the list that aren't on the list that you have thought about or heard from community members?
Technology is not on the list.
So,
Yes, technology where,
Yeah, well, people are going to ask that, yes.
so yeah,
I'm
technology
asking
enhancements.
questions that people have asked of me.
So obviously, technology enhancements is, we're moving more and more of that into the PI. We spent about $1 million out of the general fund on technology. As we look at packaging that operating PI number, as I said before, 2 mils of PI is $7.8 million. Jeff Gordon, our facilities director, gave a presentation to the board years ago about 20-year capital needs, and he's going to have an update on that here coming up in September, second meeting in September, so we can look at what those capital needs are. When Jeff gave that presentation years ago, the capital needs for 20 years were $6 million a year. We asked for a mill of PI to get $3.6 million a year, and that included some technology. So I think when we put the operating PI number together, we can come up with an operating PI number that does address all of our capital needs in addition to our long-term technology needs.
and again, those would be the shorter term capital projects that we have, thinking, 3 to 6 years versus 20 to 30, which we would put in the long-term financing of a bond.
I appreciate that it's a very comprehensive list, that you've looked at a lot of different needs and priorities, et cetera. So I thought that was a good slide.
Again, just for example, like the playground, ADA compliant and soft surface playground. And we've got playground equipment that's been in place, in a lot of places for longer than 20 years, and it's not ADA compliant. And so our PTOs have been just inundated with requests to update those. They're too expensive for PTOs to fund, and they're in need. So that's why we felt compelled to put them, from a safety standpoint, and whoever had the idea to put the rocks on the playgrounds?
I guess to answer your question, are there things on the list that you're on 100% sold on? For me, it's elementary 17. So I don't understand that need there.
Okay.
So not tonight.
Dig deeper into the data. And I think the simple answer to that, I didn't even say, you said not tonight, but the simple answer to that is, I think in that 10-year window, an absolute. So it's better to get it into this package as part of a new village package and not have to worry about putting it in the next one, because we're not gonna sell the
We
debt.
don't sell the bonds, so we need it, just like we did with
So,
original elementary 16, which is now additions to the buildings.
told you that'd be fun.
Well, that was
Other information that you'd like us to research?
All right, thank you.
Thank you. I don't know what's going on in it.
Would you please present the treasure action items, please?
Yes, please. I would like to present treasure action items A through E for approval, please.
So moved.
I'll second.
Any discussion? No? Please call the roll.
Mrs. Fiesel,
Yes.
Mrs. Patrick,
Yes.
Mr. Bartz,
Yes.
Mr. King,
Yes.
and Mr. O'Brien.
Yes.
Thank you.
Mr. Rafe, could you please present superintendent action items? I believe we have one to pull and vote on.
Yes, sir, I will start by presenting superintendent action item B3 for approval. That is the approved classified Wednesday/Saturday school instructor at $50 per occurrence paid through memorandum billing for 2019-2020 school year, John C. Fiesel, Olentangy High School.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Okay, please call the roll.
Mr. Bartz,
Yes.
Mr. King,
Yes.
Mrs. Fiesel,
Abstain.
Mrs. Patrick,
Yes.
and Mr. O'Brien.
Yes.
Thank you.
Could you please present the remaining items?
Yes, sir, present superintendent action items A through E, excluding B3 for approval.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, any discussion? Please call the roll.
Dave.
Dave.
Thank you. Mrs. Fiesel,
Yes.
Mr. King,
Yes.
Mr. Bartz,
Yes.
Mrs. Patrick,
Yes.
and Mr. O'Brien.
Yes.
Thank you.
I'll now entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? When's our next meeting? What's the date?
12.
Well,
At-
at the Career Center.
September 12th at the Career Center is the next meeting.
Mrs. Patrick,
Yes.
Mr. King,
Was Mr. Barnes?
it was Mr. I
It was
am
me.
sorry.
We threw me there.
The one time I didn't ask, I apologize.
Ability.
Mr. Bartz,
Yes.
Mrs. Fiesel,
Yes.
Mr. King,
Yes.
and Mr. O'Brien.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, everybody.
I will.